dear precious Heavenly Father, we want to come to you again this morning, thanking you for the opportunity where we can come before you and learn at your feet. And we just pray, Lord, that you will lead and guide Brother Parminder and place your words and thoughts upon him, that we can also grasp a hold of the different principles that you want to reveal to us. And we just ask that all things will be made clear in your way and in your time. We thank you for hearing and answering our prayer in Jesus' most precious and holy name. Amen.
Rachel picks up some notes. So you should have 3 pieces of paper. One of them is it's called the 400-year prophecy given to Abraham. It was what Elder Jeff mentioned in devotion yesterday, so I thought I'd print it out for you. Fortunately, I forgot to rotate it, so it's in portrait, not landscape. But it's very readable. So that's one of the handouts. It's not germane to the lesson that we're doing, but it just demonstrates the years and the verses that deal with the birth of Moses. And we brought that up. Why did we bring that up? Sister Sarah, do you remember why that came up?
Sorry, I wasn't.
The 400 years?
Yeah, this 400 years. Do you remember why it came up? In the devotion yesterday.
I do.
Yeah, I'll just want to
Okay.
Sorry, I was not following right now because of the sheet.
Brother Jonathan, do you remember why?
Peter, I didn't follow, I had all these.
Brother Henry? Any of the students? Any students remember? Why? Oh, I think you understand the question. There's a document going right. It's dealing with the prophecy of Abraham, the 400 years, 430 years. And do you remember why it got brought up in class? So Sarah, were you going to?
Yeah, it was the time of the end, so when Moses or Aaron's birth, it was the fulfillment of that prophecy, right?
Yes, and it connects Moses and Aaron together, because they would. So that's kind of why that came up. And you've got another sheet which is the chronologies from Ahaz to Zedekiah. So you have that one with all the Bible references, most of the Bible references, and some kind of commentary about what's going on.
We're missing a sheet in the back.
2 sheets.
2 sheets. I don't know if we've run out.
Which one?
I have these 2.
And you didn't get one?
I printed out 20. I don't know if that was enough. That's enough.
This is all right. But these are the notes.
Do you have extras back there?
Yeah.
And the third one is a short section from Prophets and Kings.
He has ready extra.
Samina, so hier wird auch noch gezeigt.
Before we address those, I just want to read a short section. I haven't given the handout for this, but I think it's been uploaded. This is from an unpublished manuscript 129, 1908. It's from the unpublished works. I just want to read one paragraph which I thought was interesting. And what this is going to show us is the relationship between Daniel chapter 9 and Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 9, Daniel chapter 6, the prayer of Daniel and the lion's den. So has everybody got their handouts?
It was one more set here.
And we're all focused. Here we have the source of Daniel's wisdom. He sought the Lord. He could not confine himself to the king's business, but he was speaking with the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Daniel had communion with God. The address of Daniel to God was in the Lord's keeping before he was cast into the lion's den. The one special duty of Daniel was to keep close to his duty in prayer, although under the decree that if any man made a prayer to God, he should be cast into the lion's den. Promise had been made, after 70 years I will visit you and perform my good word toward you. So the prayer of Daniel in chapter 9, she says, is before he's being cast into the lion's den. When I read this manuscript, he doesn't explicitly say, but I took the inference that the prayer of Daniel 9 is actually the prayer that he's doing when he gets into trouble.
I had the same thought.
Yeah. So I don't know how. I think I did ask for it to be uploaded. I'll print out at least that section for class. I don't know if you're able to get hold of the unpublished writings.
When he gets into trouble in Daniel 6.
Yes.
For praying?
For praying, when he's prayed
Okay.
3 times, and because that's what they're going to catch him out on. I think the prayer that he's actually doing there is the prayer of Daniel 9, because she's putting that in that order, but she doesn't definitively say that is the specific prayer. But I think reading between the lines, I'll just read that section again. I don't know. But yeah, the context of it. Oh, have you got it?
He's saying that
Yes, yeah. After 70 years I will visit you, perform my good word toward you. Jeremiah 29:10, yeah. The address of Daniel to God was in the Lord's keeping before he was cast into the lion's den. The one special duty of Daniel was to keep close to his duty in prayer, although under the decree that if any man made a prayer to God, he should be cast into the lion's den. Promise had been made. After 70 years I will visit you and perform my good word towards you. So obviously the passage that she's quoting isn't part of the prayer, it's the documents that he's reading from Jeremiah 29.
The paragraph before, it points out that in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus. So it gives you specific the time frame when he was doing that.
Yes, because both chapters begin that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
the part that made me think what you were saying is when she quotes Jeremiah 29, it's like she's saying, the promise had been made, therefore Daniel was going to pray.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Like you're saying, reading between the lines, it sounds like what she means to say is that.
Just going to review those chronologies that we spoke of yesterday, but before we do that, let me just let's turn to 2 Chronicles 29. So we're going to read 29 verse 1 and then turn the page over, next chapter, and chapter 30 verse 1 to 3. 1 to 5. 29 1 and then 30 1 to 5. We're going to start with this one.
Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 20 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah.
Then chapter 30 verses 1 to 5.
And Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah, and wrote letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they should come into the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel.
For the king had taken counsel, and his princes,
and all the congregation in Jerusalem to keep the Passover in the second month.
For they could not keep it at that time, because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently, neither had the people gathered themselves together to Jerusalem.
And the thing pleased the king and all the congregation.
So they established a decree to make proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan, that they should come to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem, for they had not done it for a long time in such sort as it was written.
And if you turn to Numbers chapter 9, we'll read from verse 1 to verse 14.
Chapter 9 of Numbers. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying,
Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season.
In the 14th day of this month, at even ye shall keep it in his appointed season, according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof shall ye keep it.
And Moses spake unto the children of Israel, that they should keep the Passover.
And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did the children of Israel.
And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day, as they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day.
And those men said unto him, We are defiled by dead body of a man. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering of the Lord in his appointed season among the children of Israel?
And Moses said unto them, Stand still, and I will hear what the Lord will command concerning you.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying,
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord.
The 14th day of the second month at even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Back to the front.
They shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it. According to all the ordinances of the Passover they shall keep it.
But the man is clean, and is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people. Because he brought not the offering of the Lord in his appointed season, that man shall bear his sin.
And if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto the Lord, according to the ordinance of the Passover, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. Ye shall have one ordinance, both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land.
And it's on this sheet here, under Hezekiah. It says,
What sheet was this?
the chronology sheet.
Okay.
Just want to read from 2 Kings chapter 17. It's the year 723. 2 Kings 17 verses 4 and 5. And 2 Kings 18 verse 9.
2 Kings 17 verse 4. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to show king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison.
Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years.
Sorry, I don't know where we are.
2 Kings 18 verse 9.
And it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it.
So you'll remember yesterday that we said that if we take the reign of Hezekiah and we mark his first, fourth and 6th year of his reign, that this is 723 and this is marking the siege, or the beginning of the destruction of Samaria, and it's right here in the first year that he's calling the Passover. So we can see that this Passover call is being made before the destruction here in 723, and this is the final call for the Israelites to escape Samaria before utter destruction happens. They've been warned by the prophets Hosea and Amos for many, many years, and at one level it says that they're going to have no more warning, no more help, no more assistance. But even at the very end, when Hezekiah comes to the throne, he gives them one more opportunity to come to the Passover, and not only just a Passover. That's how it's described in 2 Chronicles 29, 20 and 30. But the way Ellen White talks about it, this is their last call to escape out of Samaria before the Babylonians are going to come and destroy them, and they're going to be totally lost. So we're just going to read that section.
Siege was high.
Sorry, yeah. So this is taken from Prophets and Kings.
In Review and Herald, I wasn't able to figure this one out. In the Review and Herald, February 12, 1914, paragraph 9, it says, about 2 years later, in the 7th year of Hoshea, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. I was trying to figure out 2 years from what, because it doesn't really line up with what they were saying. Did anybody come across that statement?
2 years from the 2nd year of Hezekiah. What'd she say? Tanya, what
It talks about the reform that Hezekiah started, and that would be in his first year.
Could you give the code again? Review and Herald.
Review and Herald, February 12, 1914.
February 12, 1914. And what paragraph?
Well, I just kind of read that part in there. 9, paragraph 9. It says about 2 years later, in the 7th year of Hoshea, and it would be the 7th year of Hoshea.
Okay, so I think we're going to read that actually here.
Oh, okay.
I think we're going to read it. So just to answer your question, I think it's talking about this time period here. Which says about 2 years, but we'll confirm that.
Okay,
so we're reading Prophets and Kings, picking up from page 287, paragraph 2. And who's going to start reading? Who's last?
Menahem, far from repenting of the evil that had brought ruin in his kingdom, continued in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. Pekahiah and Pekah, his successor, also did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. In the days of Pekah, who reigned 20 years,
Pileser,
king of Assyria, invaded Israel and carried away with him a multitude of captives from among the tribes living in Galilee and east of the Jordan, the Reubenites and the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, with others of the inhabitants of Gilead and Galilee, all of the land of
Naphtali.
Were scattered among the heathen in lands far removed from Palestine.
So we've just gone back 3 kings. We're in the reign of Menahem. So you have Menahem, Pekahiah, Pekah, and then Hoshea. So they're the last 4 kings in Israel, and that's where this segment's beginning. So we've gone back, and Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, is coming into the land, and he's destroying all of this. He's destroying Samaria, basically.
Brother Parminder, in the Review and Herald, it says that but Menahem, far from repenting of the evil, says that he continued throughout the 10 years of his reign in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which it's left out from Patriarchs and Kings. Is that what it is, Patriarchs and Kings? Yeah.
Prophets and kings.
Prophets again. And then it says that from this terrible blow the kingdom never recovered. That was also left out too.
Yeah, so if we read the next paragraph, who's next?
From this terrible blow the northern kingdom never recovered. The feeble remnant continued the forms of government, though no longer possessed the power. Only one more ruler, Hoshea, was to follow Pekah. Soon the kingdom was to be swept away forever. But in that time of sorrow and distress, God still remembered mercy and gave the people another opportunity to turn from adultery. In the 3rd year of Hoshea's reign, good King Hezekiah began to rule in Judah and as speedily as possible instituted important reforms in the temple service at Jerusalem. A Passover celebration was arranged for, and to this feast were invited not only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, over which Hezekiah had been appointed king, but all the northern tribes as well. A proclamation was sounded throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan, that they should come to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem. For they had not done it for a long time in such sort as it was written.
So the posts went with the letters from the king and his princes throughout all Israel and Judah, with the pressing invitation, Ye children of Israel, turn again unto the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and he will return to the remnant of you that are escaped out of the hand of the kings of Assyria. Be ye not stiff-necked as your fathers were, but yield yourselves unto the Lord, and enter into his sanctuary, which he hath sanctified forever, and serve the Lord your God, that the fierceness of his wrath may turn away from you. For if ye turn again unto the Lord, your brethren and your children shall find compassion before them that lead them captive, so that they shall come again into this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and will not turn away his face from you, if ye return unto him.
From city to city through the country of Ephraim and Manasseh, even to Zebulun, the country sent out by Hezekiah carried the message. Israel should have recognized in this invitation an appeal to repent and turn to God. But the remnant of the 10 tribes still dwelling within the territory of the once flourishing northern kingdom treated the royal messengers from Judah with indifference and even with contempt. They laughed them to scorn and mocked them. There were a few, however, who gladly responded. Divers of Asher and Manasseh and of Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem to keep the feast of unleavened bread.
About 2 years later, Samaria was invested by the hosts of Assyria under Shalmaneser, and in the siege that followed, multitudes perished miserably of hunger and disease as well as by the sword. The city and nation fell, and the broken remnant of the 10 tribes were carried away captive and scattered in the provinces of the Syrian realm.
The destruction that befell the northern kingdom was a direct judgment from heaven. The Assyrians were merely the instruments that God used to carry out his purpose. Through Isaiah, who began to prophesy shortly before the fall of Samaria, the Lord referred to the Assyrian host as a rod of mine anger. The staff in their hand, he said, is mine indignation.
Grievously had the children of Israel sinned against the Lord their God and wrought wicked things. They would not hear, but rejected his statutes and his covenant, and he made with their fathers, and his testimony which he testified against them. It was because they had left all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, and even to calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal, and refused steadfastly to repent, that the Lord afflicted them and delivered them into the hands of spoilers until he had cast them out of his sight. In harmony with the plain warnings he had sent them by all his servants the prophets.
So was Israel carried away of their own land to Assyria, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant and all that Moses the servant of the Lord commanded.
In the terrible judgments brought upon the 10 tribes, the Lord had a wise and merciful purpose. That which he could no longer do through them in the land of their fathers, he would seek to accomplish by scattering them among the heathen. His plan for the salvation of all who chose to avail themselves of pardon through the Savior of the human race must yet be fulfilled. And in the afflictions brought upon Israel, he was preparing the way for his glory to be revealed to the nations of earth. Not all who were carried captive were impenitent. Among them were some who had remained true to God, and others who had humbled themselves before him. Through these, the sons of the living God, he would bring multitudes in the Assyrian realm to knowledge of the attributes of his character and the beneficence of his law.
So, these 2 years that it mentions, paragraph 2, page 291, about 2 years later, Samaria was invested by the hosts of Assyria under Shalmaneser. So this 2 years is from the first year, not to the 4th year, but it takes you to, if you do inclusive reckoning, it will take you to the 2nd year. It would be the 1st year and then the 2nd, or it would be the 3rd. It says invest. So what I understand that to mean is that about 2 years after the call was given at the Passover, that Samaria is going to be invaded. This word invested means, I think, to invade. And after the invasion of the land, then the siege follows. It says that in the passage.
Because we don't know when Hezekiah, the 2nd month of the 1st year, could have been, at the end of his 1st year. So 2 years could take you almost through you go all of the 1st and then you're towards the end of the 2nd, and then all of the 2nd towards the end of the 3rd. So you could be very close to that year, and it could just be a couple months,
So you're suggesting that in chapter 30, when they actually do it, is the following year, not the same year? Oh.
The same year. I'm saying that Hezekiah's 1st year could have began in the 3rd month of the year prior. So the 2nd month could have been the very end when we get to Passover. I'm just saying that we don't know when Hezekiah began, so it's very likely that, or it's at least possible, that 2 years could take you to the end of this 3rd year, or near the end of his 3rd year, which would then the land is invested, and then shortly after the siege follows. It could just be several months.
Part of the complication of these dates, when you talk about how many years a king reigns and we put dates to them, is if I without defining where you begin and end a year, if these are years, and you have a king, say this is King Ahaz, and King Ahaz dies here, halfway through a year. And then his son's going to take over. His son will take over here and begin ruling. So this would be Hezekiah. This year here is normally considered the year of ascension. It's not normally considered his first year. So this would be considered the last year of Ahaz, and this wouldn't be considered the first year of Hezekiah. His first year would actually run in agreement with the beginning of the new year. And if we're going to go from Nisan to Nisan, which is spring to spring, then you know that when Hezekiah when they considered the first year of Hezekiah, the first year, it runs from spring to spring. So I think we do know when he would have begun that, because it says at the beginning of his reign, chapter 29, I think it says it, Hezekiah began to reign when he was, 2 Chronicles 29:1, 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. And it mentions, I can't see the verse, it says in the first month, I think. Maybe in the first day of the first month. So verse 17, now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify. So I think that they're beginning this work on the first day of the first month.
The day he...
Not the day, not
No,
this
not
day,
the same,
yeah,
yeah, not
the,
the same.
there. And so, if this is the first day of the first month, where they begin to clean the sanctuary, they're going to finish on the 16th day, and then it says in the second month, I don't think we've read that, chapter 30 verse 13. And there assembled at Jerusalem much people to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the second month, in a very great congregation. So you know that they're going to have the Passover in the following month, which would be the second, so the first day, the 14th day of the second month. This is when they're keeping that Passover, and I think it's in the first year of Hezekiah. So is that the point you were making?
So, yeah, and then, so I was incorrect in what I was saying, because I didn't
Okay.
understand what you were saying about the ascension. But, so 2 years would take you approximately around the second month of his second year.
Yeah.
And so they would have invested the land for approximately another 2 years. And then the siege happened.
Yeah.
Investing just meaning attacking various spots but not fully committing to a siege.
Has someone got a dictionary they can just check that? I think investing means they come into the land and they begin to wipe out city after city.
And it wasn't their process that they took the Israelites from the northern kingdom back to Assyria and they replaced them with Assyrians. They were investing the land with their own culture. Dwayne Dewey brings that
Okay.
out. That was their technique.
So if we're gonna take that, I think we'd say that the investing would begin here and carries on, because the taking the people out of Samaria and taking them back to Assyria happens in this time period after the siege.
Oh.
But it may have begun here, if that's how you've got the definition. Oh.
To grant someone control over or authority over, to array in the symbols of office of honor, to furnish with power or authority.
Okay, so it's basically having the authority or power, but they already had that.
Surround with troops
Sorry?
or ships so as to prevent to escape or entry.
Can you say that again?
To surround with troops or ships so as to prevent escape or entry.
So we know that they're already controlling Samaria already. Tiglath-Pileser had already begun that work. We read it said, from this terrible blow, the northern kingdom never recovered. This is in the reign of Tiglath-Pileser. And the next Assyrian king is Shalmaneser. So they already controlled the land, so this investing is more than just taking possession or controlling it. This begins the decimation. So if Brother Dewey's correct that the investing is not only the subjugation of the nation, but to bring them back to Assyria and to repopulate Samaria with their own nation, it would have begun here and carried on after the siege.
I was going to say, for our time, if we're going to say Assyria is tied to the papacy, could the papacy kind of be investing into the church? Their ways of reinterpret scripture and all the other sort of things of Rome that we've sort of taken on? Just a question.
Any thoughts, anyone?
Yeah, if 723 is a type of the Sunday law, and I think it is, then what he's suggesting would agree with Sister White's comments where she talks about, Roman principles will be taken into. She's talking about how the United States government begins to adopt Roman principles, and we know that they're making their way into all the churches too, in advance of the Sunday law. So perhaps that's typifying that.
I just want one point clarified. So the first year of Hezekiah, we have the Passover. We have two of the Passover in the same year, correct? Because they did in the first month and they did in the second month.
So we skimmed over it.
They didn't finish it.
So we know that we didn't get a chance to read the whole chapter, but they begin to clean the temple in 2 Chronicles 29 verse 17. Now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the month came they to the porch of the Lord. So they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days, and in the 16th day of the first month they made an end. So we know they begin on the first day of the first month. 8 days later they've finished. I'll put the house. The way that it expresses it in the verses, at one level it says the house is the whole complex, the court and the building, but in other verses it separates the two. So it's the temple that's cleaned here, and there's the court that's cleaned here, and this is on the 8th day of the first month, and the work's finished by the 16th day of the first month. Now we know that Passover should have really occurred here on the 14th day. And then you have the 15th and then the 16th day. This is Passover. This is unleavened bread. And this is first fruits. So we know that just the history of this, in that year, they weren't able to keep the Passover because the temple structure hadn't been purified, it hadn't been sanctified, it hadn't been cleansed. So what they do is they wait a whole month, and they actually do it on the 14th. The 14th day of the second month.
If they had held one on the correct date, they wouldn't have had the need of holding the second one.
I understand that, but does that happen in the same year or the second year?
Same year.
Okay.
This is the same year.
So then I'm just trying to, about 2 years later, I'm trying to figure out, okay, where's the beginning point? What happened 2 years prior that is saying about 2 years later? From what point are we putting that on?
So we'll go back to Prophets and Kings 291, paragraph 1. 291, paragraph 1. It says, from city to city, through the country of Ephraim and Manasseh, even to Zebulun, the couriers sent out by Hezekiah carried the message. Israel should have recognized in this invitation an appeal to repent and turned to God. But the remnant of the 10 tribes still dwelling within the territory of the once flourishing northern kingdom treated the royal messengers from Judah with indifference and even with contempt. They laughed them to scorn and mocked them. There were a few, however, that gladly responded. Diverse of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem to keep the feast of unleavened bread. So she's marking the Passover here in the 14th day of the second month, and the couriers that are coming to give them this message. This is about 2 years later, 2 years after this, 2 years after. At this scale, this is between the first and the second month. 2 years after this, Samaria was invested by the host of Assyria under Shalmaneser. So 2 years later, the Assyrians begin to come into the land. So I would mark this, if this is the first year, if we're going to use inclusive reckoning, the first year would be the year 1. So this would be the second year of Hezekiah that they're entering in. At the max, it would be the 3rd year.
It says here in the 7th year of Hoshea. That would actually put on the 4th year of Hezekiah.
Where are we reading?
About 2 years later, in the 7th year. See, yours doesn't say it, but in Review and Herald says in the 7th year of Hoshea.
So let me just take Brother Arian's question, and then we'll read the Review and Herald article.
Maybe it's my lack of understanding the English, but in the paragraph you just read, 291.1, it says, but the remnant of the 10 tribes still dwelling within the territory of the once flourishing northern kingdom. What does it mean, the remnant? It tells me that there has been already a siege and that there is a remnant.
It's not the siege. This goes back from Tiglath-Pileser. If we read paragraph 1 in the document, it says, in the days of Pekah, who reigned 20 years, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, invaded Israel and carried away with him a multitude of captives from among the tribes living in Galilee and east of the Jordan. So they've already taken thousands of people before this. So let's read this.
According to what I'm seeing about investment and sieging, investment is a part of the sieging. It's the process of progressively surrounding that specific location.
So we're going to read from Review and Herald, February the 12th, 1914. Review and Herald, February the 12th, 1914, paragraph 8.
It's actually in the 9th that it says that.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to start.
I'm going to start back, which is the paragraph in the Prophets and Kings section, that Prophets and Kings 291.1.
Yes.
They're almost the same,
Yeah.
but there's a little bit of different information that's given. Yep. Review and Herald, February the 12th, 1914. From city to city through the country of Ephraim and Manasseh, even unto Zebulun, the couriers sent out by Hezekiah carried the message. Israel should have seen in this invitation an appeal to repent and turn to God, but nearly all treated the royal messengers with indifference or contempt. They laughed them to scorn and mocked them. And that's 2 Chronicles chapter 30 verse 10. But there were a few who gladly responded. Diverse of Asher and Manasseh and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem to keep the feast of unleavened bread. About 2 years later, in the 7th year of Hoshea, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years he took it, even in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. Samaria was taken, and the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria, and put them in Haber by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses the servant of the Lord commanded.
Yeah, so this is what I was trying to say, that if you don't count the ascension year in that way, which I understand you may have, but if you didn't count it that way, and Ahaz takes you through that year, and so let's say Hezekiah's first year begins just back from your dotted line.
Okay, it would begin.
Begins right
yeah.
there. And if it did begin right there, then, or even a little bit later, the time you get to the second month of that year that follows, right
Yeah.
there, the
Mhm.
time you get there, he's already almost done with his, or more than halfway done with his first year. And so, counting 2 full years from that point, you're almost through the third year. You've already, you're depending on where it starts, which is the problem that we'd have to probably resolve, you're almost through the third year, and that's about 2 years, and you're in his 7th year. So you could be 2 years and a few months and still be about 2 years, and then be standing in his 7th year. And that would be, or sorry, that be standing in his 4th year, which is the 7th year of Hosea.
So I think what Brother Michael's saying is that if you pull this back here, it gives you the ability to have more time.
Yeah, you would get closer to the 4th year than otherwise you're off by. You're off too much to consider about 2 years.
I think I'm going to struggle with making this essentially the first year of Hezekiah to buy yourself more time, because I think you're going to get problems later on when you start lining up his 4th and 7th, because they'll not end up lining up with Hoshea's reign, and then you get problems into the rest of the chronology. I don't know how to address this 2 years, because she says about 2 years and then she's quoting the 4th year. So I don't know where we'd begin that.
Can you put them back on track?
Yes.
Are we doing this? And where are we heading?
This is all starting to. It all starts with the issue: where do we take the time of the end? Is it 538 BC or 536 BC? And how do we deal with these 70 years? The 70 years comes up, is it 3 or 4 times in the scriptures? And each time you look at those 70 years, it seems to have different start points and different end points, and they're dealing with subtle differences between themselves. So how do we go about addressing all of those histories? So at first thought we might say, well, it doesn't really matter anyway, we'll just not worry about the intricacies and just get a rough idea of what we're talking about. And everybody has that rough idea, that whether or not it's exactly when Cyrus comes to the throne, or when Darius comes to the throne, or when Belshazzar is taken, it doesn't really make that much difference. But if we begin to see that the time of the end, 538 or 536, is marked in prophecy by a specific date, in this context either 538 or 536, or 1798 or 1989, but then we begin to see that there's history surrounding that, and it's in that history that surrounds it that is why we're doing all of this, to see what is the history and what truths can we get out of that. Because it's appearing that this time of the end, even though it's labelled as a single point, actually has history surrounding it, and it's this whole discussion that we continually have about a period and a point in time. And my hunch is, as we've seen when we've looked at the binding off period and brought it into our own history, when we look at this time of the end, we're going to see in the intricacies of the events that surround it some further light about that. But to establish 538 or 536, we need to go back, because those dates are constructed, or it's not even so much the dates, those histories are constructed a lot further back, which takes us to the history of Ahaz and Hezekiah. And we've already seen that, well, we already know that when we take the 2520 from 723 to 1798, that the history here has to be typified by the history here. So this beginning has to typify the end, And if we can get a better understanding of what's going on in this history, we can get a much better understanding of what's going to happen at the end and what's going to happen in our own time. To me, that's the purpose of doing this. Even though I know some people are getting bogged down in the intricacies of this.
Are we still there? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this in any way still associated with the fourth king mentioned and the whole thing?
It's related to it, but I'm not sure there's a direct connection. Because you have to resolve how you make either Darius or Hezekiah the time of the end. Sorry, Cyrus, the time of the end. But it doesn't necessarily deal with the issue of the four kings. This is Daniel 11 verse 2. Because you know that vision is given in the third year of Cyrus. So I don't think it immediately addresses it or doesn't.
So what we're doing effectively is sort of putting a magnifying glass on our understanding of the time of the end.
Yeah. We spoke yesterday, Elder Jess just mentioned it, that 723 is the type of the Sunday law. But when we take this model here, so this model here is just this tiny bit of history at the beginning. We know that the first day of the first month is being marked by 9/11. Does everybody understand why we would do that? There's a lot of information that goes into the background of this. This is the history of the Millerites, April the 19th, 1844, and how we begin to integrate that line into our own line. We can come to an understanding that this is 9/11, and here we see the temple and the court being cleansed, and even though the Levites and the priests are both involved in all of this work, this is a work that's specifically connected to the priests, and this is a work that's explicitly connected to the Levites. And here you just get the information, you get information overload to get this simple pattern or this simple layout and actually make any sense of it, because you need to put a lot of information in the back of this. You'd have to go to Ezra, you'd go to the disciples, and you can see that this is symbolised by a number 12 or 120, and this by the 70. So if you went 120 or 70, so you can see you have the two disciples, you see that you have the history of Ezra coming here, and once you begin to develop this line of history, you can mark that this is the midnight cry. Because not only is this the first day of the first month, and this is the 8th day of the first month, this is also the first day of the 5th month. So I guess we're not going to repeat that in class, but if those things, if you're not able to juggle those two things in your mind, then you really need to be able to do that to understand how this gets constructed and how we would go from 9/11 to the midnight cry, and then this would take us to the Sunday law. We know that this is the 16th day, and therefore symbolically we can make this the 15th day and make this the 14th day. And then from the 16th day we understand that this would be the first fruits, this would be unleavened bread, and this would be Passover.
And then can we make the time of the end the 10th day, where they actually were supposed to take in the lamb and prepare it for the Passover?
I guess, yeah. I hadn't thought about that. So we make this the 10th day. What
When the lamb was supposed to be taken in and prepared for the Passover.
what sometimes gets confusing at this, I get confused in this, is that we're taking this as a Sunday law, and so you have right at the beginning, in the first year of Hezekiah, the Sunday law being addressed, and in the fourth year, in the siege, is also marking the Sunday law. So I guess the other part of the question, to respond to what Brother Marco said, what's the purpose of all of this, is that you see all these different events that typify in the Sunday law, and if we don't take these unique histories and lay them one on top of the other and see that this is the Sunday law and this is the Sunday law, we don't have enough information to be able to make an adequate preparation for what's about to happen. So that, to me, is the purpose of doing all of this, is that the more information you get, you have the ability to understand what's about to happen and make adequate preparation. On one, that's in the basic level. But when we speak about the visions themselves, the Hazon, the Mereh, and the Merah vision, I know I have in the past just minimised the whole import of what the Hazon vision is. It just seemed, as when I looked at it, for a long time I thought that it serves some purpose, but it's when you get to Daniel 10, when you see the Mereh vision, when you see Christ, Daniel 8:14, when you see him in the most holy place, that's when you have a spiritual experience with God. It's at that point, if you like, your sins get put away, you get humbled in the dust, and everything else before that is just information. But we know now that that's not the case, and that's, I think, one of the biggest arguments or the biggest obstacles that we have to explain to those who don't understand this message, is that the study of reform lines, the study of the Hazon vision, actually takes sin out of your life. The reason we know that is because if we say here that at the midnight cry we're going to see the Mereh vision and we're going to experience the Merah vision, and this is the third step, and this is the first step, we know it's at the second step that sin is supposed to be put away. This is the step of righteousness. So we know that sin has to have been put away in this stage. And the third step is a demonstration of your character. It's where judgment happens. And there's some finishing that's going on here. But I've not understood it to be a finishing of sin. This is a finishing of earthliness when we take this history and talk about Jacob's time of trouble, because there's no sin in people's lives. There's some kind of attachment to the earth, to the world, that needs to be burnt away. But sin has to be put away here. And if sin's been put away here, this is part of the discussion about how we understand the Hazon and the Mereh vision. My understanding is that the Mereh vision isn't here. And the thing that's putting sin out of your life is the Hazon vision. It's the vision of prophetic history that has that power to do that. And nobody outside of this message, I don't know if we fully comprehend it, but we're at war against it, is people say it's a futile exercise to study dates, events, histories, and the accumulation of knowledge is not going to, in any shape or form, put sin out of your life. But these lines teach you that it does. And in teaching you that it does, it's, I don't know, it's like a circular, it goes in a circle for me. It teaches that it does it, and it actually does do that. So the more you realise it does it, the more it actually does it. So,
It helps you acquire the mind of Christ, reasoning from cause to effect in all things.
Yeah.
Is this the same situation that Daniel was having, this same circle effect when he couldn't understand the relation between the 70 and the 2300, that we can't understand that the Chazon vision is actually the purpose that it is we're wanting to see that in the Mare vision, but we don't understand the relationship of eating the Chazon vision. Is this the same experience, do you think, that Daniel had that we have to have?
Yeah. The way I described it in a few days ago, on the most basic level, his issue is he sees things literally, and we see things. He needs to see things symbolically, and Christ needs to teach him that. And he's representing a class of people who actually overcome that obstacle. And we know that, today, many of us haven't been able to overcome that problem of how you deal with the literal and the symbolic. But yeah, it's exactly how what you're saying.
Going back to what you were saying on the board, that on the first one you have the Sunday law. In the history of Daniel, now that we're recognizing that actually Daniel 6, it's actually during the Darius and the first year when Darius takes over Babylon, and that Daniel is put into the lion dens before the 3 young men are put into the fire furnace. We actually have 2 Sunday laws there too.
What was that last part?
Well, Daniel 9 and Daniel 6 occurs before the first part of Darius, the first
Yeah, but
reign.
that's not the last part you said.
Yeah,
You said
well-
they were put in he was put in the lion's den before they were put in the fiery furnace.
Yes. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong.
Good.
Because that was under Nebuchadnezzar, the son of Darius. But I'm just trying to say that there's 2 Sunday laws there too. I just had them wrong chronologically. Correct?
Yeah, they're both a symbol of the Sunday law, but
Right.
everyone in this room was going to let you
No,
get
I'm
away
sorry.
with that.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was wrong.
I'm going to say, see on that line there, there's a kind of line. What's it?
Here?
Yeah, that's the first, 4th and 6th meaning. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the 4th year of Hezekiah
Okay.
and the 6th year of Hezekiah,
Yeah.
which works out to be the 6th and the 9th year of Hoshea. 7th and the 9th year. 7th and the 9th.
The 7th is the 4th?
The 7th is the 4th.
Okay.
Just want to go back. I've been thinking about this statement. It says, about 2 years later, Samaria was invested by the hosts of Assyria.
The
What?
The 9th year, you put 4th.
Oh, sorry.
And that's
Just for the video. Hosea.
I think I'm reading this a different way now. It says that there's this call that's made. That call in our line would be here. This is the call. This is Prophets and Kings 291.1. The call that's made to the 10 tribes begins here. So this is where the 2 sticks begin to be joined. And by the time you get here, this is the Passover. We didn't make a comment going back to Numbers, but the reason we brought up Numbers is because you can see that they're actually doing the Passover in the wrong month. They're doing it on the 14th day of the second month as opposed to the 14th day of the first month when they're supposed to be doing this. And it gives reason why you can do that. The original was that if you're defiled by a dead body, that you weren't allowed to keep the original Passover, so that you could do it in the second month. So this issue of defilement.
Okay. No, is it or on a long journey? I was remembering.
Yeah, or on a long journey.
You see that invest?
Yes.
Was that invest on the Passover? So the 1 year Passover, they refused, and the next year Passover, that's when Assyria came and didn't invest.
No, I'm saying these 2 Passovers in the same year. All of this history is the first year of Hezekiah. In the first month, they clean the temple, They've missed the Passover on the 14th because it's going to occur here, and then they're going to do it the following month.
No, I'm not.
I'm not answering your question then.
No, I'm saying when Assyria come and invest, is that exactly on the Passover?
No, I don't think it is. I'm not understanding it that way.
If it was, there's no light to demonstrate that.
So all I was saying is in Numbers, when we read the second Passover, this is why we're picking up the Passover here, for those who have been defiled and those who have been going on a long journey. If you didn't qualify in those characteristics, you would not qualify to enter into this Passover. This Passover is for the 10 tribes, primarily, which is at the Sunday law, because in this time period, what are we not supposed to be doing?
Going anywhere.
We're not supposed to be going there, we're supposed to be tarried, so we don't qualify of being going on a long journey, and this is the history of what group of people? This is the virgins, and what does it say of the virgins? They've not been defiled. So there's no defilement and there's no long journey. So we don't qualify to enter into this Passover. This is the Passover for the 10 tribes who are going to come out of Samaria. Even though everybody's going to partake of this, because we've partook of our Passover back here.
So they're calling it the midnight cry.
Yes.
Just to try to picture this in my mind, and people are coming, but they're going to wait a whole nother month to actually do it. On a real line, literally. They're making a call, and we know they're not ready really on the 16th day. So they've called for people to come and wait for about 45 days till the next time around, or how does that look?
They would start calling them when they knew they weren't chapter 29. They've cleaned the temple by the 16th day. Then they have a dedication service.
Yeah.
Then he realizes that we need to have a Passover. He consults with his leading men. They realize that legitimately they're allowed to have one.
They call it Passover then.
Sorry?
So they're calling it Passover then. The real call, the loud cry, is going forth with the Sunday law.
I'm not answering your question, sorry.
Because you're saying they realize at the 16th day of the first month that there's people that are missing pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, everybody, they've not even had a Passover here. It's because they've missed the Passover.
It's only after the 16th day that they realize that they...
Well, I'm sure they realised it all the way through, but there's nothing. But they can't do anything about it. Once the 16th day happens, for me, it's dovetailing the history and seeing the prophetic significance of that. Because when you go through the chronology of the history, everything sort of gets out of sync. Because essentially what we're doing is we're saying this 16th day here, where they've missed the Passover, the temple's going to be dedicated. In some way, to me, is actually taking us back to here.
Yeah.
This dedication of the temple, getting it all ready. And then the call is made, because they're going to dedicate the temple, then they're going to make a call, then they're going to have the second Passover.
Okay.
I say second, but it's the first one in that history, because there wasn't Passover before. But all that's happening historically over here. So we're going to take this from the 16th day, the dedication, to the call, to the Passover, and get that and bring it and lay it over here.
Okay.
So
there's two lines. They're identical,
Yes.
same lines.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to see.
So that's what I was going to ask. There's two lines because there's a call at 9/11 then to come out.
I think the call is actually at the midnight cry.
So there's no call at 9/11 for the 144? Like called, chosen, and faithful?
It's just a whole other line.
There is a call, I mean, if you say in verse 5 says, and he said unto them, hear me, ye Levites, sanctify now yourself and sanctify the house of the Lord of your father. I would take it as the call that he's calling the Levites and the priest
Yes.
to handle the sanctuary and to make it right.
The call I'm talking about, this call I'm talking about here is the call to Samaria.
I don't think it's an accident that you're building a lot of that model upon Numbers chapter 9, and Numbers chapter 10 immediately goes into how you call people and the distinction between the different kinds of calls. You have a call to a sacred assembly that you make with these two silver trumps, and you also have a call to war. But in there, if you're reading very carefully, it's marked that the people that sound those trumpets are priests. So at 9/11, there's a calling of the priests to sanctify themselves, because they're the ones that have to blow the trumpets. Okay, so the trumpet call at 9/11 is something that's more supernatural, so to speak. But by midnight cry, he's developed a group of priests that are going to call a sacred assembly for the Levites, and thereafter the trumpet alarm of the war, which is the Sunday law, is simultaneously the loud cry bringing in the 11th hour workers. So I think you got to read chapter 10 and chapter 9 of Numbers together to address the call. But I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding it correct, is how I understand it too.
Was already said, so I've nothing.
If you say it again, when people say that, I prefer them to say it, because normally people say it in a different way, and you get a richer understanding. So even if someone said it, please.
Yeah, I was just trying to answer Allison's question that the call at midnight is specific for the 10 tribes, therefore it's for the 11th hour workers, and that 9/11 is a different call. It's more for the priests, also what Jeff just said.
So we know that there's a call here for the priests and there's a call here for the Levites, but the call that's being made in this history is a call to the 10 tribes. And I'm saying that call begins when you take this history and overlay it here, from the dedication to the call to the Passover.
Maybe I'm not familiar with this history, because Passover is on the 14th day of the first month. So why were they holding a Passover on the 16th day? Is that what's being said?
No.
Okay.
You're not allowed to keep a Passover on the 16th day, so they're not going to keep one. What they're going to do is they're going to dedicate the temple, because it's been desecrated, so they have to sanctify it before they can have a Passover. So they consult between themselves and they realise that they have a legal precedent to actually have a Passover in the following month. There's some rules to do that, and that's why they're going to do the Passover the next month on the exact correct day, the 14th day of the second month.
So for those keeping that Passover, their call is the 8th day of the first month.
Yes, specifically for the 10 tribes.
Right.
In my mind, if we get overly critical about the history and try and make prophetic significance of that, to me it begins to break down. If you get too bogged down,
I was just trying to understand it a little.
I'm just saying it generally for people, that you'll end up causing yourself problems that you can see there's a dedication, then there's a call, and then there's a Passover, and that history there, which runs sequentially afterwards, has components to it that you bring back here, because in this history, essentially people who have never kept the Passover in Judah are keeping the Passover. The historical context of that, which would say that it's okay not to have the partake of and eat the Passover until you get to here. But we know if you do that and you're in Judah, it's already too late to do that. So that specific part of the history, I don't think that's what that history that story is trying to teach. It's teaching a specific point. Do people understand what I just said? Maybe you can explain it better.
Historically, like we've just been saying, they didn't keep the Passover the first time. So if you were to prophetically just take that to say, like what you were saying, even Judah and everyone and the king all just come to the Sunday law to do the Passover, and there's no first Passover. So only by adding other lines can you see that there is a call at 9/11 and you have to partake of the Passover then till the Sunday law, but this is only dealing with the 11th hour worker.
See that call here? Is that call to Israel?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Is it okay? Is that so? What date is that call like in regard to the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th?
It's post 16th. This is the dedication. Then there's the call, and then there's the 14th of the second. It's here.
Okay.
Historically, this call, I'm not saying that, we understand that this is not a call of evangelism, because technically this call at midnight cry is the call of by the priest to the Levites, but there's an awareness by Samaria, by the 10 tribes, that something's happening, so they begin to see that there's, you have to put another line of thought in here. That I'm not trying to say here we go out to the world and begin to call them into this movement. Into the church.
The calling of the Levites is the plowing of the 11th hour workers.
What I was going to ask was, what was I going to say?
Sorry.
I have a question, and if you want to address it later, that's fine. Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun are the three that are mentioned in coming out. Do we see a prophetic significance of those three? And if so, what?
I haven't looked at it. I just don't know the answer to that. But I'll try and look at it.
Yeah. Could that? There was laughed to scorn when the call came, and I'm just wondering, could it be because Israel didn't understand? You were saying that they had a legal right, something along them lines, to move the Passover to the next month.
Yeah.
Could the northern tribes have been laughing because they probably could have thought they were keeping the Passover on the wrong day and not really understanding what is supposed to happen in that type of situation?
I think they've just got a wrong religion. They're so used to battle worship.
But did they not believe that they was, because the woman at the well said, we have, this is Jacob's brother, we have Jacob unto our father, or something like that. And Christ says you worship you know not what. So I've always thought that they thought that they were Adventists, like they've got that belief.
Does the Catholic Church say it's Christian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it?
No. No, but that's the point I'm making. They think that they think that they are correct, the same way the Adventist Church think that they're correct, and they think that present truth people are wrong. So I'm saying Hezekiah could have been a present truth person, and he's calling them to say, do this thing this way, but them in their pomp, they're saying, yeah, I'm laughing you to scorn because you are not keeping the Passover on the right day, the 14th's already gone, and maybe they don't know that they can do the Passover in the second month.
Maybe.
So I'm just asking if there's any information that you have that maybe that could.
Chapter 30, verse 5, we did read this. It speaks about, so they established a decree to make proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan. And this again, from Beersheba to Dan, or vice versa, is marking midnight cry for the Sunday law. And I'm going to ask one of the students just to go through it, a 10-minute study, just so that we can all get to speed up to speed with that. Most of us probably understand that the symbol of the gathering of all Israel, all the 12 tribes, the whole nation of Israel, happens during this time period. This is this gathering, and that's where it's been marked. This call is happening in this time period here. We've marked the call as a singular event. I think someone said what they do for 45 days or something. I can't remember who said that. But this call, it takes a long time for the callers to go out and for people to come in. It's a progressive event. It's not all happening. They're not all going to come on one day and sit in Jerusalem and wait. Some of these people are going to come right at the very end. Some are going to come right at the beginning, depending where you live, how quickly you respond, what you need to do. So this gathering is happening all in this time period, and by the time you get to this event here, which we've marked as the 16th of the first month, which is historically that, as it worked out, is actually the 16th, is the 14th day of the second month. So if I write the 14th day here of the second month, you need to understand again to be able to juggle these two symbols and see that this is the 16th day of the first month at one level, but it's also the 14th day of the second month at another level. And here you see that the point that's being brought to view here for me is that the 12 tribes are now gathered together, not that Judah is now partaking of a legitimate or legal Passover. Does that make sense?
Though historically they are.
Sorry?
Though historically they are.
But yes, historically there are. Because
so we have to disconnect those.
Yeah. Sister Tanya.
I think verse 3 gives us the explanation why they decided to do the second Passover. It says, for they could not keep it at that time because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently, neither had the people gathered themselves together to Jerusalem. And then on the second gathering is still telling us on verse 15, then they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the second month, and the priests and the Levites were ashamed and sanctified themselves and brought in the burnt offerings into the house of the Lord. Right here, 17, for there were many in the congregation that were not sanctified, therefore the Levites had the charge of the killing of the Passover for everyone that was not clean to sanctify them unto the Lord. And then it says that the whole assembly took counsel, 23, to keep other 7 days, and they kept the other 7 days with gladness.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in that chapter. I'm not. But yeah, verse 3, it says that the priests hadn't fully sanctified themselves, but we also know that the sanctuary hadn't been, and the priests at one level are a symbol of that.
Well, if you go back to Leviticus 8, it basically tells you the consecration of Aaron and his children. They actually took 7 days for them to be inside the courtyard in order for them to be consecrated and purified, ready for the service. And I was just wondering if that's going to be, should it be an applies also to the priest during the time of Hezekiah, or that wasn't.
I don't know if you're able to simplify the point you're making in the question you're bringing, because I don't think I fully grasp what the point you're making in the question that you're asking after.
The first year of Hezekiah calls the priests to come in to basically purify and to sanctify the sanctuary for them to begin processing. But then we know the problem is that the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently. So the issue is that they didn't go through the way what they're described in Leviticus 8.
There's that problem, but also the sanctuary itself isn't ready. There's two issues going on. There's the issue of the priests haven't sanctified themselves fully, and the reason is because why couldn't they in verse 3? Why could they not sanctify themselves sufficiently? It's because they were doing the work of cleansing the sanctuary here.
Right.
So the symbol of the cleaning of the sanctuary here is both a symbol of the structure and also of the priest itself. They become one. So we could read verse 3 as implying that there's some problem with the priests, that they're bad people and they're not wanting to do the work that the Lord wanted them to do. But chapter 29 doesn't give that impression. Chapter 29 says they're faithful people. The problem is the sanctuary isn't clean. And so if they're cleaning a sanctuary that's been defiled, they could not be clean themselves. So I don't read any negativity in verse 3. I'm not even suggesting that you do, but sometimes we might think that our problem is that we're bad people. We've got a work to do, and an understanding of the cleansing of that temple and the priests, I think, gives probably a broader perspective of what's going on in that dynamic. I don't know if that addresses your question.
You also have to remember on other lines that, like you're saying, that at the midnight cry the priests are sanctified at that point, but they still have a work to do in the sense that the Levites aren't called yet. You can't have you need the rest of the priest/Levite group to be fully constructed before you can go out to Israel. So they just don't even have the full group ready. So that's how I would read it in a sense, is that there's still a work to do in the sanctuary, like you're saying, and an internal work still.
Verse 34 of 29 says, for the Levites were more upright in heart to sanctify themselves than the priests.
Yeah,
that's what I think Sister White talks about, that those people who come in later, the work is much shorter. They're much more zealous than the previous groups. But I don't know if that's speaking to that.
Because the first part of verse 34 says that the priests, with chapter 29 verse 34, but the priests were too few. And we wonder why there's so few of us. there's this dynamic between this few and the many, and also this issue of consecration. I know there's this testimony that as you get further along, these people seem to be more consecrated than the people the priests at the beginning. I don't know. I struggle to read that too literally, to see that these people are going to be more faithful, more consecrated than the people who came at the beginning. I see it an issue of numbers as opposed to personal consecration. But I'm
trying to figure out what will precede the Passover.
This one? You mean?
You bring in that Passover sort
bring
of
it back
to,
here.
to the left.
Yes.
So if the Passover's there, what precedes it?
The call. The call. The dedication. The dedication.
Because I'm trying to think with the unleavened bread stuff and the first fruits. So just forget that. So when we put the Passover there, forget about the unleavened bread stuff and just deal with the call and the other stuff.
Yeah, this is it's getting that history and taking some points from it and turn it into a prophetic truth. If you take everything, I think the model just begins to break down.
So it's dedication, call, Passover on the next one.
Yeah.
We've got like 3 or 4 lines represented right there,
Yeah.
so
At
you gotta
least,
be able
yeah.
to separate each of them.
So that's the graph. I just want to go back to this 2 years, this thing here. I think I'm reading it differently. This is how I'm reading it now. We take the Review and Herald article. It says, let me just quickly read it in a few moments. It says, about 2 years later, in the 7th year of Hoshea, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria. I think the Review and Herald article and this one need to be put together. So I'm putting it this way. This is the 2 years. This is the 4th year of Hezekiah, the 7th year of Hoshea, when the siege begins. So that's what she's pointing out. She says about 2 years later, in the 7th year of Hoshea. And I think this is when the investing begins. So you have the Passover call in the first year. It takes them, a few weeks to get to Judah, have the second Passover, and after that, there's further things that go on. They're there for a good while. Some of them stay, obviously some of them don't stay. And in this intervening time period here, there begins to be this work that Hoshea is doing in Samaria, where he's withdrawing his allegiance from the Assyrians and going over to the side of the Egyptians. And now the Assyrians are going to deal with this issue, and they begin to invest the land, and it takes them 2 years to do this, and by this time you get to the end of the second year, then you've reached the 7th year of Hoshea.
So that's what's another word for invest, like conquer or
To conquer, Brother Gabriel said,
or intrude?
they already own the land anyway, but now they're going to come and I think he says something about using.
It says to surround with troops.
Yeah.
And hindering people from going out.
So now they're using military force. They're going to subjugate the land.
Maybe this doesn't matter, but Samaria can represent the whole northern kingdom, or it can represent the capital city that gets surrounded. So there's probably a distinction there. It's the country of Samaria, if we call it that, is being conquered, but the siege that is the focus of prophecy is the siege that takes place upon the city of Samaria. Am I wrong?
No, and maybe we haven't clarified that well enough. This investing is Samaria, the country, and this is Samaria, the city. So I think I'm reading the investing doesn't happen in the first year of Hezekiah. It happens later on in this time period where they've got time to escape, and there's this transfer of allegiance, and it's here where this investment begins, not back here. So that's how I'm reconciling the Review and Herald and the Prophet and King statement.
Yeah. I know you gotta close. So the only problem I have with the way that you're reading that is that the grammar suggests that the investing takes place at the end of 2 years. About 2 years later, Samaria was invested by Assyria, and then
Samaria, the city.
Yeah, it suggests that Samaria, or even the country, one or the other, it doesn't really matter to me at this point, but just grammatically the structure is after 2 years, Samaria was invested.
Okay.
But during the 2 years, Samaria, the country, is being invested.
Yeah, but that I'm just saying that sentence just says that 2 years later, Samaria was invested, and if you 2 years later from what previous paragraph says 2 years after the second month, when they kept the Passover, Samaria was invested. That's how it reads grammatically to me, and I could be wrong.
But the investing was going on even before Hezekiah comes to the throne.
Yes, but 2 years later it was invested, so it had been invested, or...
But Michael, in the same paragraph, she mentions also the siege and the city. So basically, what you're saying that the investing is on
the city.
Samaria city.
I have no problem with that. I'm just saying that it says 2 years later Samaria was invested.
Yeah, that was
So-
after the 2 years. So first comes the investing of the country, then 2 years pass, and after they pass, they invest the city and siege it.
So what we'll do is we'll have a think about it during the day and bring it up again tomorrow. So for tomorrow, Brother Colin's going to look at what subject? The hissing. He's going to give us a quick review of the hissing. And I wanted to ask one of the other students, maybe Brother Thibault, if you would do this. 723 is an important date, you know that. The Pioneers, I think, picked up 722. I know that Higher Medicine picks up 723 correctly. But there's this issue about the full year principle. How we go about explaining the full year principle. It's something that comes up over and over again. So if you could explain to us how the full year principle works. So just 5-10 minutes, and we'll do that on, it's Tuesday today, we'll do that on Thursday. We'll do that on Thursday. 10 minutes just to show how the full year principle works, because I'm not sure if all the students know just the mechanics of that, because it has play into much of these dates. Let's pose your prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your loving kindness and your goodness towards us. As we delve into these histories, these parables, Father, and we begin to grapple with what they mean to us at the end of the world, may each of us have both an intellectual and an experimental understanding, Lord, that these things have power to change our lives. We know it's under the ministry of the second angel that we need to put sin away. Father, we understand that we're now in this history and that our investigation of the Word is doing the work that you would have it to do. May each of us enter into that work. We ask and pray in the name of Jesus.